What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Progressive Gentleman Podcast. I'm your host, Dan.
I'm Matt.
And as always, thanks for taking the time to listen to us nerd out about music. We got Volume 3 Hidden Gems coming at you hard and fast right now. We're pretty excited about this one. We enjoy doing this segment. Not only do we get to kind of discover new music while we're kind of figuring out which bands we're going to put in these episodes, but we really like showing people new music as well and kind of giving smaller, lesser known bands, and that's not meant to be offensive in any way. These are just bands that we feel like deserve more recognition, and we like to give them that platform.
Yeah, it's good to, it's like some of the bands, we have a wide range of monthly listeners and stuff through their Spotify.
For sure.
Not that there's like no one listening to them or anything, but it's just like they're criminally under listened to and they deserve as much spotlight as they can get.
Yeah, there are bands out there with, 100,000 monthly listeners or whatever that deserve 1 million. You know what I mean? Like that's still undervalued, underappreciated. Whether or not $100,000 monthly listener band would actually make one of these episodes, probably not. But, we have some like 20, 30,000 monthly listener bands that we feel like are on par with bands with, 10 times that many listeners. And those bands, deserve a spot on an episode like this.
Yeah, for sure.
And they should be making at least $100,000. But anyways, so the first band that we want to talk about, just get right into it, right?
Yeah, might as well.
A band from the UK. They're like progressive metalcore. That's probably how I would describe them. A band called Desolance. They actually reached out to us. Thank you guys for doing that. We appreciate the support. And it was a band we hadn't heard of before. They haven't really been on Spotify very long, though.
Yeah, I think their first single was like July 15th or something like that. I don't know why that date sticks out in my head.
It was something like that. That sounds about right. We were looking at stuff like that a little bit in the beginning, but before we went live with this here, but these guys don't have a lot of monthly listeners, probably because they've only been around since July, but the production quality is spot on. I mean, I compare them to bands like Currents, Era, maybe Loathe a little bit.
Yeah, there's parts too for me that give me like some Spencer from Periphery vocals, and there's one track in particular on their EP. I'm blanking on the name of it. I think it's Down Again, something like that. I think it's Down Again.
Okay.
It has like, it starts off very like Periphery sounding. So they cover a wide range of bands. I think they've got a lot of different sounds that they kind of incorporate into their stuff. And I'm assuming they're probably like inspirations. But, if not, they're definitely doing their own thing and mixing these different sounds well.
Yeah, you definitely get that, like, modern metalcore vibe from these guys, like an Era or a Currents, kind of like I already mentioned. I could definitely see those being major influence for these guys. And I know their most recent EP, I think it was mixed from Bleed From Within, right? Or like the guy for Stephen Jones from Bleed From Within. Words are just hard for me today. I apologize. Bear with me as we go here. But so that's pretty awesome. They have that sort of, professional, like well-known touch, for lack of a better word, to their music. You can tell, that it's produced by someone who's been around the block, so to speak. And
and they know what they're doing, Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely see these guys on tour on a modern metalcore type, progressive metalcore style tour with a band like Era or Currents.
That would be really cool.
I'm not sure if these guys have been on the road at all or opened for any bands like this. But they would fit right in for sure. They've kind of got that like groove metal style too, like almost reminiscent of like a kind of like modern hardcore, how they get into those grooves where like all the pit people start doing their little two-step or whatever. Like, there are moments during their music where I kind of like feel that vibe a little bit as well. But then there are other moments where I feel like I kind of compare some of their music to like Silent Planet a little bit. Not like, I mean, Garrett Russell and Silent Planet, it's very, very unique vocal style. So I wouldn't go as far as to say the vocal style is reminiscent of them, but just like from an instrumental standpoint, like stylistically, I can get vibes like that, and like maybe some modern Veil of Maya as well.
Yeah, I definitely can get that from the instrumentation. There's like weirdly that Black Gold. It starts off and it gives me like modern Pantera sound.
You did say that, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. I get where you were coming from with that, like from like the instrumental part
just
of it,
purely
like,
the instrumental, and it's only like that riff that opens up in Black Gold, and then it goes like completely different. But it's just like when it first starts out, and that was the first song that I listened to by them, and I was like, are they going to be like a modern Pantera? I was like, that's kind of cool. And then, it went into the like very progressive metalcore, era type stuff. So I was like, it wasn't what I was expecting based off of that, like, I don't know, 10, 15 second like intro riff. And I was like, whoa, this is a ride.
It's always interesting, like when you're listening to new music for the first time. Like for me personally, anytime I'm listening to something new, I'm always trying to draw parallels, right? And it's weird the roller coaster that a progressive band can take you on. Just because of how many style changes and stuff happen in a song. Like I was driving today listening to another band that we're going to talk to, and I think I went through like 4 or 5 bands just on the one song I was listening to, and I was like, okay, this is weird, because a lot of times those bands aren't even like super related, you know what I mean? Like it's easy to say, era and currents and stuff like that. Guys were at their core comparing Desolance to those bands are similar, but then you start throwing in like a Silent Planet, and that's kind of a curveball a little bit. And Veil of Maya does a lot of different things. You're mentioning like Spencer from Periphery style vocals and Periphery riffs, which is also pretty different from, all of this is in that progressive like metalcore family, but these are very different bands.
They kind of have their own like,
and then you're throwing Pantera out, like that's a huge curveball. So I mean, it's always neat to sort of just see where new music kind of takes you from like you're trying to come up with what does this remind me of. It's always interesting to see where your mind takes you whenever you're listening to something like that. So definitely cool. They just released a EP called All That Is Left to Believe. We linked it at one point on our socials, but obviously we'll be linking all of their stuff again as the week goes on. And it seems like they might be working on another EP as well. I did see on Instagram, I think yesterday maybe, that they just finished tracking guitars for EP number 2. So
they don't mess around.
So they're pumping out the tunes. So definitely, go follow these guys while you can, get in the know and get ready for more new music as you sort of discover them with the existing music, right? So a lot to look forward to from these guys, I think. And definitely looking forward to seeing kind of where they go if they end up on a tour with an era or occurrence.
I could definitely see them sometime, like especially with putting it, getting a second EP under their belt and like, having enough to do like a full on set.
Absolutely.
To kind of be like, tour opener for someone like Era or Currents or something, in a tour like that. So that would be cool to see too.
Absolutely. So Desolance, progressive metalcore band out of the UK. We'll be linking all their stuff like we said. Definitely give them a listen, give them a follow, and enjoy. I think we're pretty confident that you will, especially if you like these bands that we're comparing them to. And now a similar band, not exactly, but probably the most similar that we're going to talk to today is Suspyria. I think that's how we're going to pronounce that. Suspyria. I'm going to say Suspyria. That sounds better. Apologies if we butchered that either way. But these guys are from Australia, another band that reached out to us. Again, thank you guys so much for the support and, for entrusting us with judging your music, right?
Just two schmucks in an extra bedroom, talking about music.
Exactly. And so we do appreciate it, and we also appreciate that you guys are making good music, because this is another good one. Kind of like more straightforward metalcore in this situation. Not as many progressive elements, but they're still there. And I think it's a nice blend sort of like newer progressive metalcore or just newer metalcore sound with some of like the older sort of classic metalcore bands that you've come to know and love if you're a metalcore fan, like your Killswitch Engages or your As I Lay Dying, pre-wife attempted murder. But
well, Tim Lambesis has a new band. Did you see that?
I didn't see that. I don't follow that man. But yeah, it's a cool blend where you get like sort of the older style, but then another band that kind of reminds me of Era a little bit, with the sort of more modern metalcore style riffs. They even have some like 808 drops randomly, which is like a very modern metalcore thing now.
Throwing in some more like hip hoppy type elements or like little beats, like little runs in the middle or something.
I just like, honestly, it's just kind of like a drop. It's just, you hear that 808, it's like boom, like into like a breakdown of sorts.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I was thinking you were talking about like that, like
no, they don't drop into like a hip hop beat or anything. They just like,
that's a pretty common thing now too.
It is because like bands like North Lane and stuff that are getting more into like or like Issues.
Yeah, they definitely do a lot of that.
Yeah, but no, these guys are more straightforward with the metalcore style. I even got like some Parkway Drive, older Parkway Drive, not the newer garbage that they're putting out now. But sorry if you like Parkway Drive or modern Parkway Drive. But and then there was a song I was listening to that reminded me of the song Pittsburgh by the Amity Affliction. I don't know why. Again, this is one of those situations where you're driving and you're listening to new music and just bands start popping into your head. It actually took me a second to remember who the Amity Affliction was. It's just for some reason the lyrics from that popped into my head while a song was playing, and I don't know if it was just the vocal style or the chord structure or what it was, but like something reminded me of that song. So I was like singing it to myself, trying to figure out what song is this, and then I actually had to ask you because I remembered the title but I forgot the band. But
it's funny, like because I'm surprised that I was able to like recall that out of my memory bank, because the Amity Affliction's not a band that I've listened to a ton of. Like, actually, I didn't even know that they had a song called Pittsburgh until you had told me about it a little while ago. So I don't know why I was able to like recall that information, but when you said Pittsburgh, I was like, I know who he's talking about.
Yeah, it's strange, but I mean that did pop into my head while I was listening. I don't even remember the name of the song, but yeah, these guys, they don't have as much music. It's another band that I don't think has that much of like a footprint on streaming services. I think maybe just a handful of songs, or maybe like one full-length record and a couple singles. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah,
it looks like it's all...
or it's just maybe all the singles are also from that full length. Is that maybe accurate? I'm not sure. They have like a 30-minute 7-track record called Regression. That came out in 19, and then the rest are singles. That's what it is. So not a huge sample size yet. But everything they have out there is pretty good, especially if you're a fan of just sort of straightforward metalcore, maybe like a little bit of alt rock, like just, just standard, like maybe just standard metal influence with like a little bit of the core influence, again, like the 808 drops and shit like that modern core bands are doing.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, like when you said like the Amity Affliction, is kind of like crest into that like sort of post-hardcore-y, like into
exactly.
kind of like A Day to Remember.
Yeah,
like,
that's kind of what I was like whenever I was struggling to come up with the term, but post-hard, again, words are hard for me today apparently, but that post-hardcore like feel to it, alt-rock post-hardcore meets like modern metalcore meets with some progressive elements. I think that's a great way to sort of fully describe this band, but
I think so. And yeah, they you were talking about like the tracks and albums and stuff, and it looks like their new single, I didn't realize like how recent it came out. It was September 2nd it came out, and it's called Tabula Rasa. And that's a good track. That was actually like the first one that I listened to. It
was the first one I listened to as well. Made me want to listen to more, and made me want to include them on this on this episode as well. So definitely go check these guys out. Again, we'll be linking social medias. We'll be posting some music, making specific posts dedicated to each one of the bands we talk about. So keep an eye out for that. Give them a follow, give them a like, give them a listen, and support these guys any way you can. Suspyria from Australia.
Yeah, and also like full disclosure for any of the bands that like reach out to us, there's not like any kickbacks on our end. Like we're not getting paid to advertise for them. Like this is just purely because we enjoy their music. I know like some places like people are like question whether or not it's are you getting paid for this? And it's like, no, this is purely just like for enjoyment. Like we listened to their music because they contacted us, but and like dug in, but because like after that first song we're like, ooh, we really like this, and so like we're purely doing this like of our own accord, like
I guess I never
advertising or anything.
I guess I never thought about like if anybody would think that these bands are like paying us to review their stuff. This is all just we make these decisions, we decide who we want to talk to, and we're only going to talk about bands if if we enjoy their music. And
we're not gonna like I think just knowing both of our personalities, right. I don't think that we would want to be like saying great things and like hyping up a band that we like absolutely don't back. Like
absolutely, this all comes with our 100% progressive gentleman guarantee here that we just like their music, and we think that you'll like it too, and we think they deserve more recognition. There's nothing exchanged, no exchange of goods and services. But yeah, so definitely this is just 100% listen to these guys. And again, if your band's listening to this, or if you know of any bands that think deserve more recognition, throw them our way, because one, we just like to discover new music, and two, maybe we'll throw them on an episode. So
and like you said earlier, this is like our favorite type of episode to do. So like the more bands that we have to check out, it's the more of these episodes we can do. And, I mean, I can't speak to the listeners if this is their favorite section, but just based on like episode metrics, they seem to do well. And
these are typically the episodes that get the most views. And I think, who doesn't like to discover new music, right?
Yeah.
So some more new music for you. I imagine, maybe you've heard of these guys before, but the next band is Atlantis Chronicles. They are a tech/melodic death metal band from France. We're just going all over the globe today.
Yeah.
And as tech death or like melodic death metal typically goes, like there's typically some level of like progressive elements in the music. I always feel like tech death and prog kind of border each other as genres. And this is no exception. It's interesting because I never would associate a band like August Burns Red with like a tech death band or a melodic death metal band. But some of the style, like vocal style, reminds me a little bit of August Burns Red. I've said that about another band before, and I feel like I may have been off base, but
this one, like, that's exactly when you told me about them and I checked it out, the first thing that popped in my mind is like, is this Jake Lurs? Is like, do you have a side project?
Right. Yeah. It's so I do get those vibes, but the instrumental style definitely pulls from like death metal. Like it's, so it's that interesting mix of like, there's some metalcore-ish style, but then it just drops into like brutal, heavier stuff where you're like, metalcore bands don't do this. So
that's like it was like at first, I forget what song it was that I listened to, but like as soon as the vocals hit, I was like, is this Jake? And then like they go and do like vastly different stuff, and he has a very impressive vocal range that like while he sounds like Jake at times, and definitely has that like August Burns Red flavor, he's also kind of doing his own thing too.
Yeah, so. And then they go into like a 60-second blast beat section, and you're like, it's not. There's no confusing this. But they also have some tracks that have sort of more of like for lack of a better term, like epic production value, like similar to like bands like Fallujah or like Rivers of Nile, bands that kind of have that like ambient sort of like epic. I don't know how else to describe it. I feel like if you've listened to bands like Fallujah or Rivers of Nile, you would kind of get it. But there's some things that remind me of and those are what epic like melodic death metal tech death bands right there. So kind of makes sense, but. Then they have like the occasional breakdown that comes out of nowhere that kind of, brings you back to that core style genre. So, that's a little bit throws you for it's hard to put them in a box basically.
Yeah, they definitely are doing a lot, and like honestly, it's like hard to pinpoint their genre for me. Like listening to them, like at first, because I got the very much of the August Burns Red, I was like, oh, they're just like straight up metalcore, and then like they bring in the blast beats, and you're like, hold on.
Yeah, and then they don't sound like metalcore at all for the next like 6 minutes of music, and you're like, okay, where did that even come from? And then all of a sudden there's like a slower section, and you're like, okay, where, you know, it's progressive music, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's sort of what helps define the genre, is that it's hard to define the genre. It's hard to put bands like that in a box. They're doing so many different things, and these guys are no different. So they just dropped a full length record this year. And honestly, you know, we just had that. One of our most recent episodes was discussing, you know, which records were on our radar for album of the year. And honestly, I think this is a worthy record of just being in the discussion for like a top 10. You know what I mean? I mean, there's so many good. That new Fallujah record is just it still has me like, I love that record.
Yeah.
But these guys have a lot of like similar elements to a Fallujah. So, you know, if you listen to that new Fallujah record and you liked it, and you also like some metalcore style things, not that these guys aren't metalcore, but they do some things similar to that. This record called Nero might be something that would hit your radar, hit your top 10. And I definitely am going to have it in consideration whenever, you know, I'm going over my lists at the end of the year, because it's very good.
Yeah, it is. It's wild that, you know, this band that we kind of just discovered and stuff. And it's like, they just put out an album, and so did Fallujah. And there's like, you know, definitely some crossover there. It's like, extended universe stuff is just like there's so much good music. It's just it's awesome that, you know, these bands are able to put out music like this, and
this is one of those bands that I discovered just like driving, listening to. I think maybe I was listening to Fallujah, because I'll often put on the Dreamless record just because it's fantastic, and
where it does the like radio,
it does the like
afterwards.
Similar bands or whatever, and they popped up, and I ended up taking a screenshot while I'm driving as I, you know, safely at a stop, you know, drive safe, you know, but yeah, this is one of those bands that, you know, I discovered by accident, and now we're talking about potential album of the year situations. So, you know, you never know when you're going to discover good music, and hopefully the people listening to this are discovering this band and feeling the same way that I did. So
also just like the album artwork and like their logo and stuff is all super cool too. Like there's definitely a lot of care and love that went into like all of the stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's definitely worth checking them out.
Yep. So once again, the band was Atlantis Chronicles.
Also a cool name too.
It is a cool name. Tech melodic death metal band from France with some prog elements. We'll be linking all their stuff as I've been saying after each band, but I'm probably still going to do it. So whatever. So keep an eye out for that. And moving on to a similar band. Like the first two bands are kind of in the same vein. These next two bands, you know, were kind of in the same vein, and that's Kardashev. We did talk about them a little bit, or we did. I don't know if we talked about them or they were just in one of our videos that we
did it like an Instagram, TikTok of like bands you should check out. And
these guys were one of them. They're from Arizona. They actually newly signed to Metal Blade Records for an album that they just released this year. So another one of those potential album of the year situations, another 2022 release. They're kind of in that melodic death metal vein again, especially with the instrumentals. But then they do some interesting things with their clean vocal style. I actually was reminded of a band that we talked about called Astronoid. Less filtered. I don't know if they're doing like vocal effects or if it's just a lot of layering or what it is, but like for some reason the clean vocals, my brain went to, I don't know who else this reminds me of other than Astronoid. That's what popped up in my head. And I was like looking for some sort of like confirmation of that thought. There's a better word for that, but I'm not coming up with it right now. Again, words are hard. And in the bands you may like section for them, Astronoid was on there. So I was like, there it is. That's all I needed to see. I'm not crazy. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to have like the ambient, clean, filtered or layered vocal style, and then it just drops into just this crushing riff and this heavy, like, you know, death metal vocal, and you're just like, this is taking me for a ride. That's nuts.
Yeah, I actually initially discovered them through just from all like the metal videos I watch on YouTube. Their singer does actually a like vocal coach lesson stuff and does like vocal react things, and it's called Kardashev Academy. And
that's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know any of that.
Yeah, and he is like, I watched a bunch of those and like didn't realize that this was his band, but then I stumbled upon this band, and then like I think in one of his episodes he talks about like, oh, my band, and I was like
connected the dots.
Wait a minute. And yeah, he does some like crazy stuff with his voice too. Like I've seen in the one music video, he does like, he pulls his cheeks like like a grandma pinching the cheeks, and he does the growl while pulling his cheeks apart, and it makes this like predator sounding like just monster growl. And it's just like, it's really cool because it's, I've never seen a vocalist do that before. Like, they always contort their face and like their chest cavity and their throat to make the different sounds. But just like seeing him like implement his hands to make the sound,
What's his name?
I can't remember what his name is, but the YouTube page is Kardashev Academy.
Mr. Kardashev Academy. Do you do that live? Like, that just sounds like something that, I mean, you see these vocalists that do, your Will Ramoses or whatever, these guys that have these crazy vocal styles. And then you're like, can you do it live? And then you see it live and you're like, holy shit, you can do it live. That's something that I would be like, whenever you're waiting for Will Ramos to do his weird like pig thing or whatever, like I'd be going to these shows just waiting to see him do the like hands on the cheek predator thing. Yeah. Like so I'm just curious, do you do that live? But anyways,
I think it's in the Between the Sea and Sky video. So anyone listening, if you want to see what I'm talking about, check that out. It's like, and he's like,
I'm listening and I'm going to check that out later.
he's like in the woods too. So it makes it even funnier. Like he's just being filmed in the woods and he's like pulling on his cheeks and he's going like, and it's just like,
that's amazing.
It's so cool. And like the sound that he makes with it is like, it clearly, it alters his cavity so that it makes the sound different. And he talks a lot about that, like how to alter like your mouth cavity to make sounds different and like project and stuff. And I actually learned a ton of like vocal stuff from him. Not that I'm like a metal vocalist by any means, but it's just super interesting to me, and because I love metal, just like learning about it is cool. So yeah, they're an awesome band that makes great music, and then they also make interesting YouTube videos too.
Yeah,
so
that's sweet. Yeah,
I think they Twitch stream too, actually.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, to kind of go back to just all the different vocal styles, and just the changes in styles and genres and stuff as you listen to their music. It was reminiscent of like a Between the Buried and Me type situation, where how many different style changes you sort of experience within one track or one record. Not that I would compare these guys to Between the Buried and Me, like from a music perspective, but they're kind of like a heavier Between the Buried and Me, just as far as how often they change their styles. I mean, there were moments where I was like, is this black metal now? Like,
and it's funny because sometimes it's like, it goes into the very like spacey, ambient, like sort of like the part that you were referring to with like Astronoid.
Yeah, exactly.
And it goes from that to like blast beats and like shrill like black metal vocals, just like on the like on the turn of a dime.
Yeah, like if gun to my head, if I had to come up with a description, not a description, but just like something to compare these guys to, what I came up with was like a band like Flesh God Apocalypse or Humanity's Last Breath, but with like Between the Buried and Me style, like level style changes. Yeah.
Those are some good. It's the Flesh God Apocalypse. I haven't listened to much of them. They also have like a lot of like keyboard and stuff, right?
They do, yeah. Okay. They have a concert pianist in their band.
I was gonna say, I thought that there was some sort of like plays the organ or keyboard or piano or something.
They're sweet. If you've never heard of Flesh God Apocalypse, they're pretty awesome.
But yeah, there's definitely stuff by that like that I've heard from Flesh God that sounds like reminiscent. Like I could see elements of that in,
especially like instrumentally, minus maybe the concert pianist. But like it's not like they're playing, it's not like Beethoven metal. Like I wouldn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's not anything like that. It's just an interesting element to add to your music. But at their core, Flesh God Apocalypse is like a tech death band, and that's kind of what these guys are at their core as well. And they did drop a record, like we said, called Liminal Right. Full length record, and it goes pretty hard. I listened to the whole thing today, and it's awesome. I
listened to the Almanac so much. It's their album from 2017, and I hadn't listened to them in a little bit, and then I saw that I missed their album release this year. I did listen to the one from 2020, but I kind of I always gravitated towards the Almanac, and then now seeing Liminal Right and listening to it, it's damn good. So
yeah, and if you want to hear what I'm talking about when I say like the occasional black metal style vocal, there's a song called Lavender Calligraphy on that new record. That's the one that I like noted that I was like, is this black metal? So yeah, just throwing that out there while I'm thinking of it. But yeah, another record that I think is definitely worthy of the album of the year type, to be in that conversation. So definitely on my radar for that whenever, we're getting closer to the end of the year and I'm ready to sit down and sort of get my shit together on that. But Kardashev, band from Arizona, pretty awesome band. And, looking forward to seeing what they do in the future. And
I hope
especially on Metal Blade, now you expect that they're going to probably be on some pretty major tours, right?
I hope so. I hope to see them come out this way. I would love to go to a show that they're on.
Yep. So, keep an eye out for that. We'll be posting anything as it happens. If they announce a tour, we'll post it. And we'll be posting links to their social media and all that stuff. So give them a follow, give them a like, give them a listen. And moving on to a band that we have talked about probably like 3 times on this podcast, so might as well make it a 4th, right? A band that we discovered at a show. They filled in for Idola on the Intervals Thank You Scientist Cryptodira tour. And that band is Satyr.
Yeah, we've definitely talked about them a few times. I think we actually talked about them in our last episode.
We might have. Oh yeah, we definitely did because we were talking about like albums of the year conversation, and they released a record called Totem it's definitely in my top 10 currently. They're a very unique band. I mean, they kind of get lumped in with like the Swancore bands, which if you don't know what that is, that's like Will Swan from Dance Gavin Dance. They sort of call bands that are sort of Dance Gavin Dance derivatives like Swancore. And these guys get lumped in with that, but I feel like they're a lot more unique than that. I feel like, I wouldn't say that they sound like Dance Gavin Dance directly or like, Idola, or the closest Swan core band that I would lump them in with maybe is like Hail the Sun, maybe, because they have sort of that like emo-ish flavor while not being emo. I mean, the closest to emo is probably Hail the Sun out of that. I mean, but I would categorize them as just like progressive metalcore is basically how these guys should be categorized.
Yeah.
They have a sound that's all their own. They do blend sort of that emo-ish style into their music, and there's some like pop punk-ish vibes at times, and then they'll go into a breakdown and you're like, all right.
Yeah, they do a lot of particularly in their new album, they do a lot of the like Thank You Scientist, very like fluttery, like staccato, like quick riffs. I really enjoy that sound that they have. I think Haven was the track that particularly caught my attention with those like kind of like quick staccato riffs, and that was I think that's probably my favorite track off of that album actually. I was listening to it the other day when I was running, and it was very good fuel to get through a workout.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the title track as well, Totem. It's really good.
Yeah, I mean, the whole album is spectacular. That was just like the standout song for me that I was I noticed I'm like kicking it, like while I'm running, it was just like that song came on and, kind of kicked it into overdrive. So it was like, yeah, some pump up.
For sure. And they're just really nice guys. I mean, we talked about that in the last episode as well, but the two guitarists and vocalists hung out with us a little bit at the show. And, we probably talked to the lead singer for like 30 minutes after the show. And we mentioned it on the last episode. They were kind of like getting on the bus, like, it's time to go. Like they had to like come get them, basically, take them away from us while we were talking. So, and they signed records for us and all kinds of stuff. So it was really cool.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll be back out this way again soon.
For sure. But yeah, I mean, if you had to come up with bands to compare them to, Hail the Sun, Dance Gavin Dance, I mean, they do fit a little bit into that swancore mix, but other metalcore bands too. I mean, we talk about Era, right? I mean, they're kind of in that ballpark a little bit sometimes, but it's weird that, none of those bands have the like pop punk-ish like vibe that they go into at times, I feel like.
Yeah. The band and I don't know why it is, because it's not like an exact comparison, but the one band that always sticks out in my head whenever I listen to them is Fall of Troy. Like, I just get...
Okay.
I think it's just like because
I can see
of
that
the
too,
riffs
yeah.
that it's just like I get that like FCP remix
kind
of sound in my head, and that's just like
Doppelganger. That record's so good.
Yeah.
No, I can definitely see that too.
Yeah, like it's not exact or anything, but there's just something about it that like it always takes my brain to that album and that particular Fall of Troy album.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, bands like Fall of Troy, bands like Idola, bands like Dance Gavin Dance, bands like Hail the Sun, more modern, sort of straight down the middle metalcore, prog metalcore bands like Era, Currents, stuff like that. Bands we've already kind of talked about and compare a lot of bands to, but these guys are like a mix of all of that, and they blend the elements well. And it's another band that's tough to put them in a box. That's pretty much progressive music at its core is like that. But
that's the thing I like is when we're doing these episodes, like you'd think that a podcast that's by and large about progressive rock and metal would be like, oh, how have they not run out of content already? It's like, because we've got bands like these, like they're so different and they do so many different things from each other that, while we did have some similar bands, they still like did something of their own that makes them like noteworthy. And it's like,
right. I mean, there is a lot of music out there that sort of like sounds the same.
Yeah.
And there's progressive metal bands that, progressive music isn't immune from that, but I feel like with progressive music, with how different and how many styles you can blend into prog, it makes it a lot harder for things to be like carbon copies. Like metalcore to me is a genre like at its core just metalcore. That you see a lot of like bands sounding the same.
Yeah.
But as soon as you start throwing progressive elements in there and mixing different styles and throwing in like, weird samples and just all this different stuff that like prog musicians do, having changes in vocal styles, whatever, like dueling vocalists, however you want to do it, there's enough that you can do different to stand out. And Satyr definitely stands out.
For sure.
It's tough to find one band to compare them to. So
yeah, and I don't really even think like the bands that we listed are like probably the closer things, but I don't even think those like really.
No, there's like, no direct comp. It's any band we mention, we're just trying to get close. Just trying to say basically, hey, if you like these bands, there's probably something about this band that you'll also like.
Yeah, it's like they're one of the bands that like no matter how many times we talk about them, still like usually there's like a band that's like they're very much like this.
Yeah.
But for them, it's like they're kind of like a little bit of a lot of different bands, but they're really doing like their own thing and don't sound like anybody else.
Yeah, 100%. And they're honestly one of my favorite bands that I've discovered, in recent memory. One of those bands that I'm really glad we went to that show, and glad that Idola, I really liked Idola, and their record last year was in my top 10. So I would have really enjoyed seeing them as well. But at the same time, I already knew about them. They were already on my radar. So I'm honestly kind of glad that they weren't able to tour. And that Satyr took their place, because I don't know if I would have discovered them, or if I would have, it wouldn't have been as soon, or maybe I would have found them after this Totem release, but we might not be talking about them right now if that didn't happen. So
so it was kind of a probably not so much for Idola, but it was a good turn of events for Satyr and for us to get to like discover them and hear their music and stuff. And it was like, because they got announced for that tour, then we started listening to them in preparation for the show to like get what their sound was. And then just seeing them live just was like an extra like icing on the cake. Wow, these guys have like a really fun stage presence too. And they're cool dudes, and the music's awesome and stuff.
Yep. So again, the band is Satyr, Satyr. The record that they released this year is called Totem. These guys are out of Atlanta, Georgia, and we will be linking all of their stuff. One of our favorite bands right now, and hopefully they'll become one of yours as well. But that's the last band we wanted to talk about. All 5 bands that we talked about here are quickly becoming favorites of ours. A lot of their music's in our rotation pretty much daily at this point, even with that Fallujah record that dropped.
That album, it's so good.
But yeah, hopefully, you guys vibe with these guys. If you do, give them a like, give them a follow, and support these guys any way you can. If they're on a show somewhere,
the gentleman sent you.
Yeah, if that's a thing, maybe that's a thing that we can start. But and aside from that, keep an eye on our page. We have some exciting stuff coming up here soon, and some more episodes planned. Some potential band interviews in the works.
I'm excited for adding that in there.
Yeah, and just a lot of exciting stuff coming up. So. Keep an eye on our page. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening to us. We appreciate your support, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks.